Welcome back to you. We have a live look at the White House this morning. The president set to award the Presidential Medal of Freedom to the late conservative activist Charlie Kirk on what would have been his 32nd birthday today. Tonight's ceremony at the White House will honor the co-founder of Turning Point USA, who was shot and killed last month while speaking at Utah Valley University. There he is with his beautiful family. And Kirk's wife, Erica, is expected to accept this award on his behalf. Joining us now, former White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer. Sean, good morning to you. It's great to have you on the program. You know, the president, especially the vice president, had a very close relationship with Charlie Kirk. But at the same time, you know, you were a part of the team that managed presidential messaging. Can you walk us through how a decision like this Medal of Freedom award comes together behind the scenes?
Well, that's a great question, Kelly, because I think in normal circumstances, there are people that have done great things in life, science or, you know, the arts or what have you. Charlie not only was huge for the movement, but I think society at large in terms of the tolerance that he preached, the discussion that he tried to get people to engage in. But he was, as you mentioned, a close and personal friend, not just of Vice President Vance, but of President Trump. President Trump not only kind of saw him as maybe a son of sorts, but also as a key strategic advisor. When you hear President Trump talk about different social media outlets that he did, different podcasts that he did, different efforts that he made to reach out to young voters in particular, it was Charlie Kirk that he often cited as the reason for doing that. So tonight is an opportunity, I think, to pay tribute to Charlie as a friend, Charlie as a strategist, Charlie as a movement leader, Charlie as someone who inspired a lot of people to faith and to politics. And so it kind of is a very interesting conflux of a lot of different things at one time. And it'll be a great moment, I think, tonight, especially on the heels. You think about what the president's coming off, this huge peace summit. And despite whether you agreed with Charlie Kirk's views or not, what he really wanted, why he was on that campus, why he was in the green that day, was to engage people in dialogue, to make us grow closer together. Charlie often said that it is only when the conversation stopped does violence ensue, right? He wanted people to talk. He wanted people to engage. President Trump wants to be the president of peace. And so tonight is sort of the domestic extension of what he just did internationally.
Right. And you know what? So many said the answer to the violence we saw play out in Utah was talking and engaging with the other side in an open and respectful way. You know, I wanted to touch on, Sean, the president wrapping up that high-stakes trip abroad. In Jerusalem, he detailed his role in brokering this deal in Gaza. We have the clip here.
After years of suffering and bloodshed, the war in Gaza is over. Humanitarian aid is now pouring in, including hundreds of truckloads of food, medical equipment, and other supplies, much of it paid for by people in this room.
We have about a minute left, but I do want to ask you, you know, he says he personally played a role in helping secure this deal. Drawing on your experience, what does that level of involvement look like behind the scenes?
Well, it's a great question because there's two aspects of it, right? When you're dealing with a major deal, whether it's a tax piece of legislation that's going through the Congress or an international trade deal, and I've been involved in those as well with two presidents, it's the people that you choose and then the latitude that you give them. They need to know when to call you to seal a deal. His choosing of Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, and Marco Rubio to lead those efforts was important. They knew what the president's red lines were. They knew the relationships that he had, who he could call on personally, the extent of the relationship that he had with many of the key players. Because remember, it wasn't just Hamas and Israel. You had to get those Arab states in particular on board. You wanted Europe to be behind the deal. And it was the people that he chose, the relationships that he had, and the ability of those people to know how far they could go in getting a deal that was critical. That's not always the case. A lot of times you got to be checking in with the president, asking, okay, do I have permission to go further? What do you want me to do with this person? How much equity are we willing to give that person in the deal? This was the perfect recipe at the right time. The president had the right people in the right place that knew exactly how to close it.
And man, did he pour praise on those partnerships in his remarks yesterday. Sean Spicer, always good to have you, sir. Great to see you. Thanks.
Thanks, Kelly. Appreciate it.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.